The rain was a cold, indifferent curtain, dragging across the neon-soaked asphalt of the city's industrial fringe. For most, this area was a ghost town after dark, a maze of forgotten warehouses and flickering streetlights. But for the Bandidos motorcycle club, this corner of the world was a sanctuary, a workshop, and a fortress. They were known by the patches they wore and the steel they rode, a brotherhood forged in rebellion, loyalty, and a reputation that preceded them like a storm front. Outsiders saw outlaws, trouble, and danger. Tonight, however, they were about to be seen as something else entirely, a last hope. Inside the clubhouse, the atmosphere was a mix of diesel smoke, stale coffee, and the low rumble of masculine conversation. Stone, the chapter president, a man whose face was a map of hard living and whose eyes missed nothing, was hunched over a schematic for a custom engine, surrounded by his most trusted members. Joker, the vice president, perpetually restless. Boomer, the sergeant-at-arms, a mountain of quiet menace. And Ghost, their resident mechanic and tech guru. They weren't discussing territory or rivals. They were debating the merits of a new torque converter when the door slammed open. It wasn't a fellow member. It was old Manolo, the weary-eyed owner of the laundromat 2 blocks down. Manolo, a man who had seen everything this neighborhood had to offer, was visibly shaking, his face pale beneath the harsh fluorescent light. "Stone, you gotta help me, please. It's the new people next door in the building behind the old foundry. I hear things, screams sometimes, loud fighting. Tonight it's worse. I heard glass break, and a little girl screaming. She's just a little thing, maybe 5 or 6. No one else will go near that place, the cops take forever. And they're scared of that building anyway. But you guys aren't scared of anything." The sound of Manolo's desperate plea cut through the noise of the garage. The men stopped instantly. The reputation of the Bandidos was built on fierce loyalty to their own, but an unspoken code ran deeper, especially among the older members who had seen too much of the world's rot. Protect the innocent. A child's scream was a red line. Stone slowly pushed the engine diagram aside, his gaze fixed on Manolo. "A little girl, you say? What exactly did you hear, Manolo?" Manolo wrung his hands. A man shouting. Just pure animal rage. And then the little girl. Her screams were just awful, followed by a terrible thud. Then quiet. Too quiet, Stone. I thought I should call the police, but I came to you first. They're too slow, and if something bad is happening right now, every second counts. They need a strong hand. They need someone who isn't going to wait for a warrant. Stone stood up, his massive frame unfolding to its full height. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Joker, get the bikes ready. Boomer, you and Tank come with me. Ghost, stay here. If we don't check in 20 minutes, you call the cops. Tell them it was an anonymous tip about a domestic disturbance with weapons." Stone's plan was calculated, immediate, and characteristic of their approach. They would move fast and decisively, and if they found trouble, they would handle it, making sure no child was caught in the crossfire. They weren't looking for a fight, but they were certainly ready for one. This wasn't about the MC code of conduct, colors, or turf. This was about doing what was right when no one else would. This was about a human crisis in their own backyard. They rolled out on their heavy bikes, the roar of the engines a purposeful challenge to the silent, wet night. The old foundry building was dark, imposing, and surrounded by a chain-link fence. They approached cautiously, dismounting their bikes and moving on foot. Stone signaled for Boomer to secure the perimeter, while he and Joker moved toward the rear entrance. The building was set back from the main road, making it the perfect place for bad things to happen unnoticed. They found a single, dimly lit apartment on the ground floor, separated from the rest of the abandoned facility. Through a window covered by a thin, dirty curtain, they could hear the muffled sound of a man's low, menacing voice and the soft, intermittent whimpering of a child. This was their target. This was where the fear was emanating from. Joker moved to the door, his hand resting on the heavy lock, while Stone pressed his ear against the thin wood. He could barely make out the man's words, something about respect and learning a lesson. Just as Joker was about to kick the door in, they heard a small, almost imperceptible noise, a tiny hand fumbling with the window near the fire escape. They moved to the window. It slid open just enough for a small, terrified face to peer out. It was the little girl Manolo had mentioned, her eyes wide and red from crying. Her hair was messy, and she held a small, tattered teddy bear clutched tightly to her chest. She saw Stone's imposing figure, dressed in leather and covered in patches, but something in his calm, steady expression must have reached her. In a whisper so fragile it was almost lost to the wind and rain, she delivered the words that instantly shattered the last vestiges of Stone's caution and transformed the Bandidos from silent observers into immediate actors. She looked at Stone, her voice shaking, barely audible above the drumming rain, and simply whispered, "He pushed Mom down." That single sentence, "He pushed Mom down," was all the justification Stone needed. It wasn't about waiting for proof. It was about protecting a vulnerable woman and a terrified child from an imminent physical threat. In that moment, Stone didn't see a criminal case. He saw a call for intervention that only their kind of decisive, non-traditional justice could answer. He didn't hesitate. He looked at Joker, his eyes burning with a cold, protective fury. There was no need for words. The mission had changed from an investigation to a rescue. They were going in now. The silence of the night was about to be broken by the sudden, violent force of men who understood that sometimes being a hero meant being an outlaw first. The Bandidos MC was about to remind the world that loyalty wasn't just for their own, and that the black leather of their cuts could also symbolize a fierce protective shield for the innocent. Their immediate reaction was calculated, powerful, and absolutely necessary. Stone didn't need another word. The small, tear-streaked face of the girl, the terrified whisper, the confirmation of violence. It was an instant trigger. He nodded once to Joker. "Door. Now." Joker didn't bother with the handle. He took 3 deliberate steps back, his heavy boot impacting the cheap wooden door with the force of a battering ram. The lock mechanism exploded inward, splintering the frame and sending the door flying across the small, dingy living room. The scene inside was chaos frozen in the moment of their entry. A woman, her face bruised and pale, was huddled against the wall, shielding herself. A man, large and sweating, stood over her, his hand raised, his expression a mask of drunken, furious resentment. And on the floor, scattered near the broken remnants of a cheap lamp, were toys and shards of glass. The man, clearly shocked by the sudden, violent intrusion, staggered back, trying to process the sight of 2 massive figures clad in leather, with patches and cold, uncompromising eyes fixed entirely on him. "Who the hell are you? Get out of my house!" the man roared, his voice thick with alcohol and adrenaline. He started to move toward them, puffing out his chest, trying to reclaim control through sheer intimidation. It was a grave mistake. These men were used to genuine threats. This was just a pathetic display of a bully caught in the act. Stone stepped fully into the room, his shadow swallowing the flickering light. His voice was a low, dangerous rumble that cut through the man's bravado like steel. The little one whispered, "He pushed Mom down." That's all we needed to hear. Joker moved with blinding speed, a practiced economic motion. Before the man could even register the threat, Joker had closed the distance. It wasn't a street brawl. It was a non-negotiable end to the confrontation. The man collapsed, stunned and silenced, and Joker immediately stepped back, his attention already on securing the area. Boomer and Tank, having heard the crash, entered the apartment, their presence doubling the protective wall around the family. They didn't speak. Their sheer size and serious demeanor were enough to communicate the finality of the situation. The air was now thick with the scent of ozone and the undeniable authority of men who would tolerate no further violence. Stone immediately turned his attention to the woman and the girl, his stance shifting instantly from hard justice to careful concern. He knelt down slowly, making sure his large size wasn't a new source of fear. He spoke gently in stark contrast to his earlier tone. "Ma'am, we're the guys from the place down the road. Manolo called us. Are you hurt? We need to get you and your daughter out of here. Right now." The woman, tears streaming down her face, nodded mutely. She was in shock, but the presence of the Bandidos, these feared, black-clad figures, was somehow bringing her a strange sense of safety, a profound realization that her ordeal was over. She whispered. He tried to take her phone. I called 911, but he disconnected it. He was shouting about money. Tank, who had quietly positioned himself near the man on the floor, spoke for the first time, his voice calm and methodical. Joker, get the little girl. Boomer, call Ghost. Tell him we need a car, non-club colors, and tell him to be discreet. We're moving them to a safe location until the morning. This was the Bandidos style of intervention, swift, protective, and focused entirely on the victim's safety, outside the slow and often bureaucratic channels of officialdom. Joker moved to the window where the little girl was still peering in. She recognized him from the fleeting moment at the window. He didn't touch her immediately. He simply offered his hand, a massive, scarred hand that suddenly seemed gentle. Hey, sweetie, you were so brave. We're going to take you and your mommy somewhere safe now. You want to ride with me? The girl, without hesitation, placed her tiny hand in his. The trust she showed in the outlaw was a powerful testament to the purity of their intent. Joker carefully lifted her, wrapping her in his heavy leather vest to shield her from the cold. As they prepared to leave, Stone looked back at the man on the floor. He leaned down, his voice returning to that cold, steel-like tone. You lay a hand on them again, you come looking for them, or you cause trouble for the people helping them, and you won't need the cops. You'll need a different kind of protection. We don't forget faces. Understand? It was a promise, a threat, and a final, non-official decree that carried far more weight in that neighborhood than any restraining order. The man could only nod, his eyes wide with a fear far greater than any domestic spat could inspire. He was no longer dealing with a helpless victim, but with a brotherhood known for its absolute enforcement of its own rules. They exited the building, moving quietly through the dark, wet night. The roar of the bikes was replaced by the low hum of a black SUV driven by Ghost, who had arrived precisely on time, blending into the industrial backdrop. The woman and her daughter were quickly and carefully loaded into the vehicle. Stone watched as the little girl, now nestled securely in her mother's arms, looked back at him, offering a small, grateful wave. In that small, non-judgmental gesture from a child, the Bandidos found a kind of validation that no official commendation could ever match. They weren't heroes by the book, but they were heroes where it counted most, in the shadows, when the law couldn't or wouldn't arrive in time. The mission was not over, but the family was safe, and the night, though dark, was a little less menacing because of their intervention. The extraction was flawless, executed with the logistical precision of a military operation, a precision the Bandidos were well versed in, honed over years of managing complex logistics. Ghost drove the family to a secure, unmarked apartment owned by the club for emergencies, a place known only to a select few, used occasionally for members' families needing a quiet place, or now for genuine victims seeking sanctuary. The safety of the mother and child was paramount. They ensured the apartment was stocked with fresh clothes, food, and basic necessities for a few days, giving the woman time to breathe, recover, and decide her next steps, without the immediate threat of her abuser looming over her. Stone, Joker, and Boomer returned to the clubhouse. The tension from the rescue operation was slowly replaced by a grim sense of satisfaction. They gathered in the garage, washing the grime of the night and the emotional weight of the encounter from their hands. They weren't seeking praise. In fact, they actively avoided any attention for these kinds of interventions. Their reputation was their shield, keeping both the good and the bad away. But among themselves, there was a shared understanding that they had acted as a true force for justice that night, a justice that operated outside the system that had failed the family. The next morning, Stone personally contacted a lawyer known to the club, a man who had often assisted them with various legal matters over the years, ensuring absolute confidentiality. This lawyer, initially surprised by the nature of the request, was briefed on the situation, the physical evidence of the abuse, and the urgent need for a protective order and legal counsel for the woman. The Bandidos weren't just about the immediate rescue. They understood that true heroism required ensuring the long-term safety and stability of the victims. They paid the initial retainer, providing the woman with a lifeline and the resources to navigate the legal process without fear of financial or physical reprisal. Later that day, Joker was tasked with checking in on the woman and her daughter. He arrived casually, bringing a bag full of groceries and some small toys for the girl. He found the atmosphere completely different. The apartment was quiet, the woman was calmer, and the little girl was coloring at a small table. When Joker knelt down to talk to her, she didn't whisper. She smiled. She held up a crayon drawing, a crude but instantly recognizable picture of 3 large black motorcycles parked in front of a house, with a stick-figure family smiling in the doorway. It was her way of acknowledging her rescuers. "We drew a picture for you," the little girl said, her voice clear and unafraid now. The woman looked at Joker, her eyes filled with gratitude that transcended words. "I don't know how to thank you," she murmured. "The police would have taken a report, maybe arrested him for a few hours, and then he would have been back. You gave us our future back. You risked everything for us." Joker, a man known for his cynicism and tough exterior, felt an unexpected lump in his throat. He simply accepted the drawing, carefully folding it and tucking it into the inner pocket of his cut, the place where their most valued possessions were kept. "You just keep drawing, kiddo. And you, Mom, you just focus on getting your legal ducks in a row. The lawyer will be in touch. Until then, you are safe. This apartment is yours until you are ready to move on, and no one knows you are here." The Bandidos' intervention was a stark reminder that labels often obscure the truth. To the world, they were dangerous outlaws, but on that rainy night they embodied the truest definition of a protector. They were the ones who heard the small, desperate whisper, "He pushed Mom down," and instead of turning away, they charged straight into the darkness. They leveraged their formidable reputation and resources, not for criminal enterprise, but to become the silent, powerful force that stood between a frightened family and a grave danger. They were the unsung heroes of the underbelly, demonstrating that compassion and fierce loyalty could exist even beneath the most intimidating of patches. Their action wasn't televised or officially recorded, but the gratitude of a little girl and her mother was a reward more valuable than any public recognition. The cycle of fear was broken, and thanks to the Bandidos MC, a new, safer chapter had begun.